Hello everyone, this is John Polichronis. I was born 1945, 15th of June 1945 at Southport. My parents are Emmanuel Polichronis and Despina Polichronis. They got married in Billawheeler, came down to Southport and then had a cafe down there, and I was born down there along with all my brothers and sisters. I'm the eldest of the family, John, Peter, my brother, first brother, Tessie, Anastasia, my sister, and George Polichronis, the fourth in the family. The young boy, he's only got 49% of the vote now, and I've got 51% of the vote. The reason is that my brother Peter and Tessie have passed away. My dad came out here to Australia 1924, I think it was, give or take a year or two. So the family's been here for almost a century. My dad came out here with one of his brothers and one of his cousins, George Polichronis, and I think it was Manuel Pavmanolis. Dad stayed here, they went back to Greece, and Dad was here. He tells me a really very interesting story, because when they came out here, a few years later we had the recession, and there was about 25% of people out of work in Australia, and they had to roam around, hitching rides on the trains to try to get from one place to another to get some work. And he tells me they often had to sleep out in the open, and his sleeping bag was one of these big potato sacks. They all got these potato sacks from the railway where people were delivering potatoes to the markets, and they were their sleeping bags. So they had a really hard time, but they got on. But anyway, he moved up to Billawheeler, and in Billawheeler he met a lot of the other Rhodians, and that's where the Pan-Rhodian Society started, in Billawheeler, and he was a cotton farmer there. During the war, the government took all the crop and of course paid them 10%, and then took about 10 years to pay the rest. But anyway, they survived. He married my mother Despina just towards the end of the war. They moved up to Southport. He bought a cafe there called the Rose Cafe. And all the kids together, we had a great time down there. We didn't have much. I mean, everybody was poor in those days. Everybody struggled. But we eventually got on. I went to school at the Southport State School, primary school, and then the Southport State High School. My father used to love going crabbing, and he often would come home with about 10 really huge big bucks. Crabs, cooked them up, and when we finished them all off, he'd go and get some more. But he had the cafe there, and it was a great time. That's where I learnt my maths, I suppose, in the cafe. I had to learn as a youngster, about 5 years old, how to give the correct change, etc. The shop used to be close to the railway station, and there was a highway down, but it wasn't very good. So most people came down by rail, and then they'd be around that area for half an hour or so, waiting for the buses to arrive, and then they'd take the buses and go to Surfers Paradise or down the coast to Coolangatta. It was quite a good shop back in those days, and I remember he did quite well for a while, until then they shut down the railway. Some of you may have noticed that the railway has gone, but there was one on the corner of almost Nin Street and Scarborough Street, Southport. I used to take all the kids to school. I'd be the eldest, and I'd take them all up there. And in spite of the fact that my father had a shop, on the way to school we'd stop at 3 or 4 places. One place we would buy some milk, another place we'd buy a Boston bun, another place we'd buy some prawns, little baby prawns. And then across the road we found a shop which had lollies. My father's shop had lollies too, but we would still buy lollies. Back in those days, you could go anywhere. There wasn't any problems. You could go down the road to the river, you could walk across the bridge to Surfers Paradise or to Main Beach, We had our bikes, we'd ride up and down the coast on our bikes. After the railway was shut down, not many people came through there and everybody was coming down the highway. So the shop shut down in the late 50s and we shifted up here to Brisbane. I went to Brisbane State High School, finished high school, got a scholarship to go to the university. Of course, back in those days, you had a lot of freedom, and when I went to university, I didn't know how to deal with this freedom and lack of discipline. And so, like a lot of people, I went a little bit wild, didn't pass my first uni year or the second year, and I had to go out and work. I started working while I was going through uni, opening oysters. So I opened oysters with the other John Polly and a few of the others who were opening oysters at Ray Richards. And that's how I survived. And then I went back, I got a job at the Commonwealth Bank. Then I went back to uni and finished off my uni studies, did an honours degree, a master's degree, finished all of that off, and then went looking for a job. I got a job at the Queensland University of Technology back in 1976, I think it was, so that's quite a time ago. In those days it was called Queensland Institute of Technology, QIT, in 1976. I started as a lecturer there and I really enjoyed that. I loved teaching and writing and doing a few publications, not a lot. And then in 1990, the QIT became the QUT. 1968, I got married. I married Eleftheria Diako Elias. And I had a couple of kids, Despina and Stella. They're now both married with kids, and Stella has one girl and Despina has a girl and a boy. So I've got 3 grandkids. The grandkids are 26, 24, 23. 2 from Despina, 1 from Stella. 26 is Vasily, 24 is Eliana, 23 is Chrysanthi. Vasily is now working with the City Council in land development. Eliana's doing hairdressing in a salon over at Anley. And Chrysanthi is still at university. She's graduating in a few weeks' time and will go to a graduation dinner afterwards. But she's going to continue. I think she's looking at doing honours and a PhD. And I wish her well. Now I'm hoping to get some great grandkids. Let's see what happens. It's looking pretty good at the moment. I hear some murmurs going on. When we came up to Southport, I met all the Sideritas. My father was instrumental in sponsoring some of the people out. My uncle came out and lived with us, Anastasi Polichronis, and then a few others started to come out. Some had connections previously to people in Billawheeler, some had connections to the Papamanolis family, to the Polichronis family, and so the Sideritiko Silawa sort of started around about that time. And quite a large number of people came out. And I was the only one who could speak a little bit of Greek and English, and so I became the interpreter. If they needed documents filled out, I'd help them with their documents. If they needed their tax filled out, I helped them with their tax. At home, they spoke both Greek and English because in the house it was Greek, in the shop it was English, because you were dealing with the Aussies, and so you had to learn English. So both of them did know their English very well, and I started to learn Greek, but it was spoken Greek, the vernacular, village-style Greek, and I thought I should teach myself some Greek, so I went out and got a couple of books And rather than go to Greek school, I may have attended 4 or 5 classes of Greek school. I didn't like that, but I did get the books out and I started to teach myself Greek, so I learnt quite a bit of Greek. When we got married, for a few months we were living with our parents in a rented property over at South Brisbane. Then I bought a property at Annerley and we moved into Annerley. Fairly big place, big yard. I've still got that one. And we raised our family there. The kids went to the Yeronga State Primary School and then Yeronga State High, which was just down the road. We had a lot of help from our parents looking after the grandkids, and so we were able to work and pay off our house and buy all of the stuff that we needed. In about 1983, we then decided we wanted to upgrade a little bit on the house, so we bought this place where we're at now, at Sunnybank Hills, and I've been here ever since. Unfortunately, about 8 years ago, a lifter here passed away with a brain tumour, very, very quickly, very sad time. But I've been here on my own or with the family from time to time, and I've continued working at QUT. I've been involved a lot with Olympic soccer. I was one of the founding fathers. I think in the second year of the Olympic, I was on the committee in 1968 when Olympic was formed from the Pan Rhodian Club. We joined the Queensland Soccer Federation. So I've been highly involved in Olympic from 1968 up to the present. As I said, my father came out in 1924. He left his little island of Rhodes there, and he left his parents there. I never met any of my grandparents. I'm named after John Polichronis, obviously, my grandfather. And I remember watching my father every month. He would get a £10 note out of the till and he'd put it in an envelope and he'd address it and he'd send it off to his father in Greece. And I heard stories from some of our relatives here saying they remember him getting his letter from Australia and really wrapped in getting this money from, oh, my manulaki, you know, I haven't seen him, when am I going to see him? But anyway, I felt good hearing those stories. I used to see him do this and I thought, well, that's nice, you know. My other grandfather, and I don't remember my grandmothers at all. I think they passed away before I was born. But my other grandfather was born in Castellorizo. My mother was born in Castellorizo, and they got bombed out. I think in 1921, when there was that war between Greece and Turkey, and they moved from there. Their house was bombed out. It was rubble in the end. They moved to Rhodes, and then my grandfather and grandmother went to America first of all, but that didn't work out. They came back from there to Castellorizo. My grandmother passed away giving childbirth, and then the grandfather packed up, took all the kids and brought them out to Australia. He went up to Silkwood, up to Babinda, Innisfail, Ayr, that area up in North Queensland. Unfortunately, my mother tells me that he passed away from what they call old man's disease. And of course I did some investigating, and old man's disease refers to prostate cancer. So he had a very aggressive prostate cancer. His name was Paraskeva, and of course my brother Peter was named after Paraskeva. Tessie was named after Theo Anastasia. I was named after my other grandfather, John. And I remember my father came to me and said, look, we're having, your mother and I having a little bit of a discussion about what we should call the last child. And he said, what name do you like out of these? And he gave me some names, and one of them was George. I said, I like George. So I gave George his name, sort of. I think he must have been named after my father's brother, who was Theo Yorgi. Anyway, so that's our connection to Castellorizo. That's our connection to Rhodos. It's a shame that we didn't get to see or hear or speak to our grandparents. Anyway, I'll now go back to school. So I went from the primary school to Southport State High, and I did 2 years there at the high school, and I did an academic course, and then after 2 years we moved up to Brisbane, and I went to Brisbane State High. I won a Commonwealth Scholarship and went to the uni. Of course, I didn't take full advantage of it in those days because I went a bit wild. We went to all of the parties and the smokos and the dances and so on, and carried on and didn't do much study. And then I had to come back to it later on. I realised later on, I said, wait a minute, you're smart enough to do this, but you haven't got through. What are you doing? And I put my head down and I studied, and I got through. And I did an honours year and a master's degree, and then I joined QUT. Party time was, say, 17 and 45, 62. About, yeah, the 60s, 61, 62, 63, yes. And like I said, back in those days, I was associated with Olympic Football Club. And one day, this guy came up to me and tapped me on the shoulder and said, my name is George Pipos, and I'm looking for someone to come and run with me on a ticket for the Greek community. And I said, oh yeah, I'll have a go at that, that'll be good. Back in those days, the elections were very, very competitive. Everybody wanted to be on the Greek community committee for some reason or other, I don't know why. I don't think it's as competitive now. But anyway, we got on and we won, and then we started to, at those days, George said that the club was in a bit of a hole financially. We had the property in Charlotte Street, where the old Guffaneer used to be, and the old church, and they'd moved over to this new one here, and it was in a financial mess, and George came in with the idea of trying to clean up the financial mess. At one stage, the bank was almost ready to take the church away from us and the Greek community centre from us because we owed a lot of money. I'm not sure why, but they wanted to have a good, complete, full church, okay? And so they found this property at South Brisbane, where the current church is located, and they moved from the smaller premises in Charlotte Street to the church of St George at South Brisbane. So about 74, I think they built the Greek Community Centre, which I think was a really great thing, a visionary thing to do. However, a lot of money was borrowed, and the pressure of interest and overdrafts was causing a lot of problems. And so it had to be straightened out. And we proceeded with the committee that was there to try to straighten it out. And we did quite well, actually, in the end. We bought about 10 properties on that block, which are now part of the Greek community. And you'll see buildings being developed there. We refurbished the Greek club, and we started really becoming a little bit more commercial with the Greek club to try to raise some money to get rid of the debts. And we did this. It took us about 6, 7, 8 years, and we really did get the community back almost into positive accounts, no overdraft or anything. But then, of course, it was very competitive, as I said, and we got voted out in some sort of a coup back in those days. I really don't want to talk about it, but we got voted out, and immediately after, about 6 months later, the community was back in huge amount of debt. And we said, we told you so, but for some reason, the politics of it, I don't know what it was. Maybe I was a little bit naive, but yeah, we got it out of trouble and then we got tossed out. But it just didn't work. They just couldn't get it together again, and it got into a lot of trouble. But anyway, it's back out of trouble now, I understand, and the newer, more recent committees have done a really good job on it, and I congratulate them very much for that. I'm for developing, as long as we're doing things for our community. Personally, I'm not in favour of private schools, but that's a personal issue. When we were there, we did think about buying a property up at Highgate Hill. Is it St. Ita's up at Highgate Hill? Is that the name of it? The Catholic Church actually offered us that site if we were prepared to pay a certain amount of money, but before we could get all of that together, we got thrown out, and that fell over. So we were going to develop that as a Greek school. The other thing we were going to do was we were going to develop Whites Hill as a sporting complex, but we lost that election, and so that fell through as well. But we had some grand visions, but we weren't there long enough to do it all, unfortunately. But anyway, I have no regrets. I thought I did an honest and good job at the community, and we made it progress. Of course, I worked with Father Gregory. It was a very interesting time. He's a very nice person, good person to work with. We didn't always agree, but he did a lot of things for the community back in those days, because he was the only priest there then. For Goodwin Park, what happened was, of course, that when for some reason or other Hellenic wasn't able to keep its finances together, they folded, and then Father Gregory said, well, we can't afford to lose Goodwin Park, which was half owned by Hellenic, and he got us together with a few others, and we raised some money. About 15 or 20 members of the Greek community got together, put down a guarantee, and we raised about over 100 grand, which was a lot of money back in those days, to buy out Goodwin Park, so that then that would become Olympics headquarters, and that's where we are now. So we moved from Dutton Park, one small field down there, into Goodwin Park, which is 4 or 5 fields now. And we're hoping, I've heard some rumours, that we may have some further developments if we can get some help with development for the Women's World Cup in 23 and the Olympics in 32, because the soccer teams will need locations to train at and to practice, and so hopefully, who knows, there may be some development which will come out of that. Okay, well, I've retired about 3 times from QUT, and they keep calling me back. I'm better than Johnny Farnham. And so I retired, quite some time ago, 2008, I think, for the first time, and a couple of times since. They keep asking me to come back and do stuff. So I've spent about 45 years at QUT on and off. I taught a lot of students, in particular a lot of the students from Greek families. It was always good to see these kids coming through and going to uni. I remembered my days and the struggle that I had to get through, and I always tried to advise them, put them on the right track, gee them up and make sure that they got through their courses. So I'm well recognised downtown from a lot of these students. One year, a few years ago, I got a presentation from the Greek community for the work that I've done for the Greek community and the rest of the community, and they had a function there. But at that function, one of my ex-students came up to me and said to me, "John, do you remember me?" And I said, "Yes, you were one of my students way back then." He said, "Yeah, well, I thought I'd come along. I heard that you were getting a presentation." He then said, "But I don't know if you remember, but one day I came in to see you. I had my son with me, And I said to you, John, I only got a 5, a credit for my unit, and I thought I did a little bit better than that, you know. And I said to him, well, actually, I think you were lucky to get a 5. It didn't work quite hard enough to get a 5. The little kid was listening. And when he left, the little kid said, Daddy, your teacher roused on you. And he's telling me this story as a presentation. And I really loved it. You know, it was really good. But I quite often see a lot of kids, some of them have gone overseas. Some are working overseas now. You know, all the students, I probably taught 20,000 students while I was at QUT, finance and accounting and a little bit of economics. And great days, and it's good to see them all getting somewhere. What am I doing now? I'm retired. Got to do something. Well, some of you on Facebook, are you on Facebook? If you're on Facebook, you'll see me on there every Saturday morning. Coffee. And a lot of people know me for my signals on my entry on Facebook every Saturday morning. When we were here, when my wife was with us back then, we often used to entertain. We used to have parties and barbecues. Still do that. I still have the kids over once a week, the grandkids over. I have, for the last 15 years, I've been running a Secret Santa session, or a Santa session for the kids of the children of my colleagues at QUT. So a couple of weeks ago, I had 60 people here for a full-blown barbecue. The whole works, and we had a few drinks and enjoyed ourselves. Travel, yes, I've done some travel, but lately COVID has knocked us about again. Hopefully we'll be able to do some more travel. Christmas parties. I've got 6 or 7 parties coming up over the next, up to the New Year's. So, you know, 4 of them will be here. So yes, I love entertaining and I'm having a great time. On my own, yes, but never mind. All good. Well, one of the most important things was getting married and having kids, okay? But on the other side of the ledger, one of the most important things to me, and the thing that I'm really proud of, if you like, is I've been able to help a lot of people to do things with their study, with you know, buying a house, or with financial advice, or with tax advice, helping them with their problems, being involved with the soccer, with the Greek community, with the Greek school, with the welfare centre, with St Nicholas Nursing Home. I was on the St Nicholas Nursing Home committee for several years as a treasurer, and I was there in the early days when the ladies raised all of that money and we helped them put it together and plan and build up St Nicholas. You know, that thing sticks in my mind. Planning and getting Olympic going, that sticks in my mind. We started with a club in 1968, 67, one team, and we've come to now we're in the NPL, and we've got 1,000 people playing soccer. Be involved with AS Asidora Society, being involved with all the people from the Horio. That's our roots. NPL is the National Premier League, which is the highest division in Queensland, and we are, all of these clubs are then feeder clubs to the Premier League in the A-League in Australia. So we're the next rung down from the A-League. And so we now have a team, a men's team and a women's team in the NPL. And the women just got promoted this year, and I was happy to be involved and see if I could get some money in for them to help them along. And it's good to see them progress. A lot of work by the girls and the girls committee, a lot of work by the Olympic committee. Very good involved committee nowadays, a lot more professional than we were. okay, when we started, but yeah, they're the sorts of things. Olympic, Ancestry, Greek community, QUT, helping people in the community is what I really love to do. And talking about my dad, a bit of a rogue, but he was also a very friendly chap and very much loved and respected. And I recall one time I was at QUT getting a cup of coffee, and this lady came up to me and tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Are you John Polichronis?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "Is your father Emmanuel Polichronis?" And I said, "Yes, he is Emmanuel Polichronis." And she said, "A very good man. He saved our family back up in Biloela. We were in some financial had some financial problems, and he gave our family some money to get them out of trouble." And he gave the money, he didn't lend it, he gave the money to them to help them get out of trouble. And she said, "I remember that very much, and my parents remember it very much, and I'm always grateful for this." I remember once my father bought me a ticket in a raffle, bought me a ticket in a sweep for the Melbourne Cup. And the prize was £600. And £600 would have bought you 2 houses back in I think it was 1956, I think it was. And he put our names on the tickets, and my ticket was the horse called Rising Fast. Don't know if you ever heard of Rising Fast, but the year before it won the Melbourne Cup, right? And this year it was running to win it 2 times in a row. Okay? It got pipped on the post by a horse called Toporoa, and that horse interfered with Rising Fast in the straight, and Rising Fast would have won the race. But the owner of Rising Fast said, "No, this horse is owned by someone who's plodding along, a plodder. I'm not going to put in a, you know, what do you call it, a protest." Anyway, so it came second. So we got second prize instead of first prize. I love that story, but my dad used to look at me and say, "Well, that's how it is."